My husband canceled our honeymoon 1 hour before the flight so I'd stay home cleaning, while his mother used our reservations. But I disappeared to Hawaii and filed for divorce after only 2 weeks of marriage. And when he showed up drunk at the restaurant, I threatened him with a restraining order that would destroy his career. I'm 28 years old. I work in digital marketing, and honestly, I still can't believe that my marriage lasted exactly 2 weeks before everything exploded in the most dramatic way possible. People ask me how I didn't see the signs, and the truth is, I did see them, but I was one of those people who always wants to make everyone happy. You know, the typical oldest daughter who learned from a young age to keep the peace and not cause problems. I guess that made me the perfect target for what came next. I met Daniel like 3 years ago, maybe a little less, at a super boring work conference, one of those where everyone is pretending to pay attention while checking their phones. He was a software engineer. He was 29 years old, and he seemed different from the other guys I had met, like more serious and responsible, or so I thought at the time. We started dating and everything seemed normal at first. Although looking back, I should have noticed that his family was too involved in everything. I don't know. Like every time we planned something, it ended up including his mom, Barbara, or some other family member. And me being the complacent idiot that I was, I always said yes, that's fine. No problem. The more the merrier, right? We dated for almost 2 years before getting married, and during that time his family basically took over our relationship. Barbara, his mom, is one of those women who has an opinion about absolutely everything and expects everyone to follow it to the letter. I remember once Daniel and I wanted to spend Christmas alone, just the two of us, and she literally showed up at my apartment crying, saying how were we going to destroy the family tradition like that? Obviously, we ended up going to her house. That happened all the time, basically. Every decision we made had to pass through Barbara's approval filter, and Daniel never, and when I say never, I mean never, took my side. It was always, well, you know how my mom is, or it's easier if we just do what she wants, or my favorite, she just wants what's best for us. My family is completely different. Thank God. My parents, William and Helen, are the warmest and most understanding people you can imagine. They raised me and my siblings with a lot of love, but also with independence. You know what I mean? They were never those controlling parents who need to know every detail of your life or who get involved in your relationships. When I introduced them to Daniel, they were super nice to him, but my mom told me privately, "Honey, are you sure this is the family you want to join?" And I told her yes, that she just had to get to know them better, that they weren't that bad. Spoiler alert, my mom was completely right. The wedding was basically a circus run by Barbara. She took control of everything, from the invitations to the menu, including the decorations and the guest list. I wanted something small and intimate, but we ended up with 200 guests, of which I knew like 40 people. The rest were all Daniel's family and friends, or rather Barbara's, because let's be honest, she was the one who invited everyone. During the planning, there was a particularly horrible moment when Melissa, who is like Daniel's cousin or something, told me in front of everyone at a family dinner that my wedding dress looked secondhand and that my family obviously didn't have the same economic level as theirs, as if that mattered or was any of her business. I stayed quiet, swallowing my tears, and Daniel said absolutely nothing to defend me. Not a word. He just laughed awkwardly and changed the subject. The wedding was in June, a super hot Saturday. I remember standing there at the altar thinking, this is what you always wanted, right? A family, stability, someone to build a life with. But there was this little voice in my head that kept saying, but is this really what you want? I ignored it. Obviously. I said I do. We kissed. Everyone applauded. And I forced myself to smile in all the photos even though, inside, I felt like something wasn't right. The reception was endless, with Barbara giving a 20-minute speech about how Daniel was her perfect baby and how she hoped I would take good care of him, as if he were a little kid who needed someone to cut his food. After the wedding, we went to our house. Well, the apartment we had rented together 3 months before. We were packing the last things for our honeymoon in Bali that we had been planning for months. I was super excited because we were finally going to be alone, without his family breathing down our necks all the time. We had the tickets bought, the hotel reserved, everything ready. And then, literally, 1 hour before we had to leave for the airport, Daniel comes into the room with a super weird face and tells me, I need to talk to you about the honeymoon. My heart sank immediately because I already knew. I already knew something bad was coming. He sat on the bed and told me, "My family decided that they're going to go to Bali in our place. They're going to use our reservations and everything." I stood there with a blouse half folded in my hands thinking, "What? What do you mean in our place?" And he continued, as if he was reading something he had memorized, saying that his family thought it would be better if I stayed home to start adapting to my responsibilities as a wife, that there was a lot to clean and organize after the wedding, and that anyway we were going to have many opportunities to travel together in the future. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't process what I was hearing. I told him, "Are you telling me that your family is going to go on our honeymoon and I'm going to stay here doing household chores like I'm a domestic employee?" And he had the nerve to tell me, "Well, don't see it like that. My mom thinks it's important that you start learning how to maintain a house properly because apparently," and he said this exactly like this, "apparently your mom didn't teach you those things." Well, I felt like I had been slapped. I started shaking from anger but also from shock. And I told him, "And what do you think? Do you agree with this?" And he just shrugged and said, "I already told them yes. It's already decided." Jessica. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the floor feeling like I couldn't breathe properly. I could hear Daniel on the other side saying not to be dramatic, that it was only 2 weeks, to understand. But something in me, I don't know, like it broke in that moment but also became clear. Suddenly, I saw with brutal clarity what my life was and what it was going to be if I stayed in that house cleaning. While my husband of literally one day went on vacation with his mommy, I saw my future. And it was an endless nightmare of being belittled and controlled and dismissed by this family that clearly saw me as a servant with marital benefits. I came out of the bathroom and told Daniel it was okay, that I understood, that I was going to stay, and he looked relieved, gave me a kiss on the forehead, as if I were a good girl who was finally understanding her place, and he left. I heard when his car started and drove away, probably to go to Barbara's house to confirm that her plan had worked perfectly. As soon as he left, I grabbed my laptop and booked a flight to Hawaii. My parents have a vacation home in Maui that they almost never use because they're too busy with work. And I had the keys and the alarm code. I packed my suitcase in like 15 minutes, putting in everything I could, left a note that simply said, "I left to reflect, don't look for me," and got out of there. The flight to Hawaii was surreal. I was in first class because I spent an absurd amount of money on the last-minute ticket. But I didn't care. I needed to escape, and I needed to do it now. During the flight, I kept checking my phone, waiting for furious messages from Daniel, but nothing. Apparently, he still hadn't realized that I wasn't at home waiting for him, obediently. I landed in Maui at like 11 at night, rented a car, and drove to my parents' house. It was this beautiful little house near the beach, surrounded by palm trees and with the sound of the ocean in the background. I went in, threw myself on the bed, and slept for like 12 hours straight. The next few days were like being in a strange bubble outside of reality. I woke up when I wanted, had breakfast on the terrace watching the sea, went to the beach, read books that I had wanted to read for months but had never had time. I took surfing lessons with a super nice instructor named Kai, who knew absolutely nothing about my life or my marriage disaster. It was liberating to be there, being completely myself, without having to worry about pleasing anyone or walking on eggshells so as not to offend Barbara or some other member of that horrible family. After like 5 days in Hawaii, I finally turned on my phone. I had 247 messages. I'm not exaggerating. Literally 247 messages. Most were from Daniel, starting with things like, "Where are you?" and quickly escalating to, "How dare you embarrass me?" And "My family is furious with you." There were also messages from Barbara saying that I was an irresponsible wife and that I had embarrassed her family. Melissa had written like 30 messages calling me everything, saying I was a spoiled brat, that I came from a family of classless people, that they should never have let Daniel marry me. There were even messages from people I didn't even know, well, all telling me what a terrible person I was for abandoning my husband. What struck me is that not a single one of those messages said, "Hey, are you okay? Did something happen? Are you safe?" Nothing. It was all about how I had offended them, how I had been selfish, how I needed to apologize immediately and come home to fix the mess I had caused. I read each message, and with each one I read, I felt more and more sure that I had made the right decision to leave. I responded to only one message. I sent it to Daniel, and it said, "I'm fine. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Don't look for me." And I turned off the phone again. I spent 2 full weeks in Maui. They were probably the 2 most important weeks of my life in terms of really understanding who I was and what I wanted. I spent a lot of time alone, just thinking, processing everything that had happened not just at the wedding but during the entire relationship with Daniel. I realized how many times I had silenced my own voice, how many times I had accepted being treated as less than human to keep the peace. One afternoon, I was surfing. Well, trying to surf because honestly I wasn't very good, and I fell off the board and was underwater for a few seconds. When I came up to the surface, gasping and laughing, I thought, this is what it feels like to be alive. Not constantly anxious and walking on eggshells, but simply living. When I finally came back home, or well, to the apartment I shared with Daniel, I found the door with the lock changed. Obviously. I called my friend Nicole, who is basically my sister from another mother, and she told me to come to her house immediately. Nicole lives alone in a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, and when I got there and told her everything, absolutely everything from the beginning, she hugged me and told me, "You stay here as long as you need, and Daniel and his family can go to hell." That same night, messages started coming again, but now it was different. Daniel was demanding that I come to the house, that we talk, that we fix this. But the tone was weird, like more desperate. Later, I found out that his parents, specifically Barbara, had given him an ultimatum, like, either you fix this with your wife or you're going to look like a failure in front of the whole family. Because of course, for them everything was about appearances, about what people were going to say if their perfect marriage collapsed after 2 weeks. A few days later, something super ugly happened. Daniel's family, led by Barbara and with Melissa at her side, went to my parents' house. My parents were there that day, luckily, because who knows what would have happened if they had found the house empty. Barbara started pounding on the door, demanding to talk to me, screaming that I had destroyed her poor son, that I was a manipulator, that my parents had raised me badly. The neighbors came out to see what was happening. It was a horrible scene. My dad, William, who is normally the calmest person in the world, had to call the police because Barbara wouldn't leave, and Melissa was threatening to break the windows. When I found out about that, something in me just said, enough is enough. I called Daniel and told him very clearly, "Your family just harassed my parents at their own home. They made a scene in front of all the neighbors. And you're going to tell me right now that your family is going to apologize to me and my parents, or this ends here." He was quiet for a moment and then said, "Jessica, you're the one who needs to apologize. You were the one who left on our honeymoon." And I told him, "No, Daniel. I left after you told me to stay home to clean while you and your mommy went to Bali. That's not a honeymoon. That's humiliation." And I hung up. I officially moved in with my parents the next day. Nicole helped me pick up the little I had at her guest apartment, and we took everything to the house where I grew up. Being there, in my childhood room, surrounded by my old things and the unconditional love of my parents, was exactly what I needed. My mom Helen made me my favorite food every day, and my dad sat with me at night to watch silly movies to distract me. They didn't pressure me to talk if I didn't want to. They didn't judge me, they were just there. One afternoon, like 2 weeks after returning from Hawaii, I was at a coffee shop near my parents' house when a girl approached me. She said, "Excuse me, are you Jessica?" I got a little scared, because I thought it was someone else from Daniel's family coming to harass me, but she quickly said, No, I'm Pam. I dated Daniel like 4 years ago. I need to talk to you." We sat down and Pam told me a story that was basically identical to mine. Daniel had introduced her to his family. Barbara had taken control of everything. He never defended her. And eventually Barbara decided that Pam wasn't good enough for her son and basically orchestrated the breakup. Pam told me, "When I heard he had married you, I literally prayed that you would have better luck than me. But it seems nothing changed." Talking to Pam was revealing because it confirmed that this wasn't something personal against me. This was a pattern. Daniel was a 29-year-old man who couldn't make his own decisions without his mom's approval, and any woman who was with him was going to go through the same thing. Pam told me something that stuck with me. She said, "You can't fix this, Jessica, because the problem isn't you. The problem is him and his inability to cut the umbilical cord with Barbara." I left that coffee shop feeling clearer than ever about what I had to do. The next day I called a lawyer. His name was Marcus Green, and Nicole had recommended him because he had helped her cousin with a complicated divorce. Marcus listened to my complete story, took notes, and at the end told me, You have a super solid case for annulment considering the duration of the marriage and the circumstances, but we're going to go for divorce because it's faster. He explained the whole process to me, told me what to expect, and made me feel for the first time in weeks that I had control of my own life. I signed the papers that same day. My hand was shaking a little when I put my signature. Not because I doubted, but because it was real. I was really ending this. Daniel found out about the divorce papers like 3 days later, when the legal server delivered them to him at work. He called me immediately, screaming so much that I had to move the phone away from my ear. He told me everything. That I was dramatic. That I was exaggerating. How dare I embarrass him like that? I told him to sign the papers and leave me alone. And I hung up. He kept calling, but I blocked his number. I blocked his whole family, in fact. All their numbers, all their social media, everything. I thought that would be the end. But no. Because this family doesn't know when to stop. Turns out one of my friends, Rachel, was celebrating her birthday at a nice restaurant downtown like 2 weeks later. I almost didn't want to go because I was still in hermit mode processing everything. But Rachel begged me, and my parents told me it would be good for me to go out and get distracted. I went, and I was really having a good time, laughing with my friends, drinking wine, eating cheese fries, when Daniel burst into the restaurant. It was a movie scene, but one of the bad ones, the kind that give you secondhand embarrassment. He came in yelling, my name. He had clearly been drinking, with red eyes and his hair all messy. The whole restaurant went silent looking at him. He saw me and started walking toward our table yelling, "How could you do this to me? How could you abandon me like this?" My friends immediately stood up between him and me, and Rachel told him to leave or she was going to call security. But Daniel wasn't listening. He kept yelling, saying that I had cheated on him, that there must be someone else. That's why I had gone to Hawaii. There was a guy at our table, Alex, who was one of my friend's boyfriend, and who had never met Daniel. Alex tried to calm him down, putting a hand on his shoulder and saying, "Dude, breathe, calm down," and Daniel, completely out of his mind, yelled at him to get off, pushed him, and tried to throw a punch at him. Alex dodged it easily, because Daniel was super uncoordinated, and at that moment security arrived and took him outside. The police arrived like 10 minutes later because someone had called 911. It was a complete disaster. The whole party ruined. And I was sitting there shaking, feeling guilty, even though rationally I knew none of this was my fault. That night, when I got to my parents' house, I was furious. Furious with Daniel, furious with his family, furious with myself for having let things get so far. I grabbed my phone and called Barbara. When she answered with her martyr voice saying, "Oh, Jessica, are you finally ready to apologize?" I told her very clearly, "Listen to me, Barbara. Your son just harassed me at a public restaurant, tried to hit someone, and the police had to intervene. If he comes near me or my family again, I'm going to get a restraining order against him. And as I assume you know, a restraining order is going to show up on his record and will probably affect his precious engineering career. So I suggest you control your son before he completely ruins his life." There was a long silence on the other side. Finally, Barbara said in a smaller voice, "There was no need for threats, Jessica." And I told her, "It's not a threat, it's a promise. Goodbye, Barbara." And I hung up. I felt powerful. Finally, after months of feeling small and insignificant, 2 days later, Marcus called me to tell me that Daniel had signed the divorce papers. Without fighting, without conditions, he just signed. Marcus seemed surprised at how fast it had happened, but I knew exactly why. Barbara had told him to sign because a restraining order or any police record was going to be much worse for the precious family reputation than a quick and quiet divorce. And so, after exactly 2 weeks of marriage and like 2 months of divorce proceedings, I officially stopped being Daniel's wife. The legal process took a while to officially complete, with Marcus handling all the paperwork and making sure I never had to see Daniel again. Every time something needed to be signed or documents reviewed, Marcus took care of coordinating everything so it would be, by mail or electronically. It was a huge relief not having to face him face to face, especially after the restaurant scene that still gave me chills every time I thought about it. Now, several months later, I'm living in my own apartment again, a small but cozy one I found near work. I went back to my routine, spending time with my real friends, with my family who never stopped supporting me, building the life I really want and not the one someone else decided I should have. There are still difficult days where I wonder if I did the right thing, if maybe I should have tried harder. But then I remember that moment 1 hour before what was supposed to be my honeymoon, standing there with a blouse in my hands while my husband told me to stay home to clean, and I know I did exactly what I had to do.